It's Empire State of Baseball on this Monday, July the 24th, 2023. Airing on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. And as always, powered by StreamYard. Gentlemen, welcome back to Empire State of Baseball. We're here live on this Monday, July the 24th. We are a couple of weeks out of the All-Star breaks, but 1 week away from the trade deadline. So one of the most important weeks of the season for certain teams. Joseph, Corey, Thomas are here live on the show. Thomas, how are we doing on this Monday?
Doing good. It was New Jersey. We had the first good full weekend of the entire summer, so that was pretty cool. Got a lot of time outside, and it was just nice to not be worried about rain.
Oh yeah, hot one on Sunday. Corey, Favs, and I were in the same location on Sunday because it was. Oh no, actually not. Corey, you missed out on the softball games, but you were down by the beach. I saw.
Yeah, I was there all year for softball, and then sure enough, first round of the playoffs, had to miss it. But I did get to the beach this weekend, and I was actually at the lake with Mr. Joe Pugliese here in our chat at his family's lake house up in Lake Naomi. Awesome weekend. It was also a sports weekend for a different sport. Got to go to my very first NASCAR race. Really cool experience. Awesome tailgating. Great time. Very fan-friendly over there. Would definitely do that again 100%.
So Joe's trying to convert you now full-time NASCAR guy.
Yeah, but it's fun, though. I'll tell you what, when you go there, they do such a great job. They give you the headsets where you could listen in to all of the drivers' pit crews, the official NASCAR feed. You could bring drinks. At least, I'm sure each arena is different, don't get me wrong. But for Pocono Racetrack, you could actually bring drinks into the arena, into the raceway itself. As long as it's not glass, you're free to go. So really cool time. A lot of free reign to walk around there. Would definitely do it again.
See, I didn't think that. I thought the headsets, I thought maybe you can communicate to each other, like if you were in a helicopter because you couldn't hear each other. I guess I was wrong about that, Joe.
Yeah, no, you can listen to any driver you want, and then you can actually listen to the actual play-by-play broadcast of the race. That's cool. You can kind of know what's going on. But that's a good segue into our special guest today. We have Pat McCarthy joining us here in a moment. He is the new radio play-by-play host for the New York Mets, along with Harry Rose and Mr. Gadd as well. And they are all involved in that booth there. Howie goes less on road games, so Mr. Pat McCarthy's leading the way on some of these road games, and he's got great insight. He's been traveling a lot with the team this year, so we're going to have him on in a minute and talk to him a little bit about his first season with the New York Mets.
Absolutely, and follow that. We got Trick of the Trade, which Pat's going to be a part of. It's always a fun game to play, especially around this time since we're going to be talking trade deadlines. It's a perfect time to play that game. The Empire Express, as we rolled out in the last couple of weeks, this is the Subway Series edition part 2 of the Empire Express, so we'll preview the 2-game set coming up at Yankee Stadium tomorrow. And then we're going to finish things off with the Fantasy Hot Corner. And Jonathan Hernandez is going to join us live to talk about his hints and tips for the fantasy week ahead. But without further ado, it is now time to welcome our special guest. And our special guest, by the way, as Joe alluded to, he's a New Jersey native. He studied at Syracuse University, College of New Jersey, and would go on to broadcast sports for Princeton University and St. Joseph's University. McCarthy would soon become the play-by-play broadcaster for the Reading Fightin' Phils and the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs of the Philadelphia Phillies organization. An organization, of course, which his legendary father, Tom McCarthy, has called home in the broadcast booth for over 16 years. Earlier this year, McCarthy joined the New York Mets broadcast family as an additional play-by-play commentator and the host of the pre- and post-game shows for WCBS 880. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Pat McCarthy. What's up, Pat?
Hey, guys. How are you? Appreciate you having me on.
Of course.
Thank you for
joining us, Pat. We appreciate you joining us and spend your time here on ESB with us here. So let's take it back a bit because we want to talk about your career and what it's led up to here with the Mets opportunity. Is there a time in your life that you can think early on that you can pinpoint where something clicked in your mind saying, I need to become a sports broadcaster?
Yeah, I think it happened a little bit later than maybe some people that wanted to get into the industry, especially as you mentioned, having grown up in it with my dad. I was probably around 16 or 17 years old when I decided that this is what I wanted to do full time. I wanted to be a history teacher at one point. I considered going into law. I had a bunch of different things that I really had interest in doing. That's always been my real passion was world history and American history, and that's what I thought I was going to study. Up until probably my sophomore year of high school, when I hosted our high school newscast called A-Town Live at Allentown High School, where I went. And by the time my senior year rolled around, I had been doing it for 2 or 3 years. And we had an interesting way of doing our homerooms, where our homerooms were after first period. And I had my TV production class during first period. And then our newscast would run right after that. So I had a conversation with my TV production teacher where I said, listen, I'd really like to make this 15-minute broadcast into the best thing that we can make it into. So he said, okay, great. If you can devote the 90-minute first block period just to making A-Town Live as great as you can be, that's all you have to do. You wouldn't have to do it. I didn't have to do any other classwork outside of devoting 90 minutes to make this 15-minute production the best it could be. So I would sit there during class. I would write scripts. I would cut highlights that I went out and shot the day before from a lot of the fall sports at Allentown, because I had played basketball and I played baseball. So I was kind of limited to just the fall sports, but that's where I got my first passion for it. And then the other thing is as I was getting older and I started to have opportunities to go with my dad to different games and work with him in broadcast booths for NFL games and college sports, I started to realize, okay, now this is really cool. And this is what I wanted to do. And I played baseball up and through college, but I'd always known that was probably the end of the line for me. I wasn't going to get a chance to play professionally. And I knew I needed to stay in baseball in some way, and I needed to stay in sports in some way. So decided that after my senior year of college, or going into the spring of my senior year of college, that I wasn't going to play baseball anymore at TCNJ. And I was going to dive into broadcasting full time. And it opened up opportunities at Princeton as a senior. And then ultimately that first internship in Reading. And from there, things just kind of got rolling from there to where I am now.
So yeah, Pat, are you saying that this all started with just a disdain for homework, and you were just getting out of homework and anything else, and that is really what kicked this off for you?
Yeah, I think I was going to do anything to not have to do classwork and do something that I was passionate about. And it's funny because it ended up being very similar in college. TCNJ doesn't have a sports broadcasting program. So I kind of molded things in my own way. I was a film major at TCNJ. I focused on film noir and the effects of post-war Europe. And that was what I studied as a senior. That's what I wrote my final paper on, which was really interesting to me. I really enjoyed it, but it had nothing to do with what I wanted to actually do in real life. So even as a senior, my senior practicum, which was met once a week, and then a massive final project for a lot of kids at TCNJ would be a short film. I went to my professor, Terry Byrne, who was there, and I said, listen, this isn't really what I'm open to doing. This isn't what I want to do. I have this internship lined up. I'm going to need to drive out to Reading every other week anyway for home games. Can I just use that as my senior practicum? And he said, of course. Why wouldn't you do it that way? And I did the same thing. I had an independent study where I hosted a podcast so I could have other broadcasters on. I hosted it once a week. It never even went anywhere. It would just get turned into my advisor, and I used that as a full credit course. So I was looking for any way possible to not do extra work in school, but still figure out ways to get to where I needed to be to prepare myself to get into the professional world.
That's a great story. And listen, I mean, you know, I've been in that situation. I used college radio, get semester credit for the maximum. I think I got 3 credits for, so I kind of cheesed it myself. So I can kind of relate to that. But, you know, fast forward to this year, obviously you're in the minor leagues, you're looking for that big opportunity. Walk us through how the process went with the Mets, from whether the call to the interview. For those of us who have never been on an interview like that, you know, what is that like, receiving that phone call from one of the biggest sports franchises, you know, in the game of baseball? And, you know, there's only 30 or 60 of these jobs, period, if you break it down. So what's that feeling like when you get that call? And tell us a little bit about that process behind how the Mets, how you went through that interview with the Mets.
Yeah, it's a pretty surreal process. And it goes back to 2021, honestly, when I did my first big league game with the Phillies. I called a couple of games on TV, and it's like a player for the first time when you go to the big leagues and you get that taste. And then you have to go down to the minors, and it's a really eye-opening experience for you of, okay, when am I going to get back, and how do I get back as quickly as I can? And then, last year I got some more opportunities in Philadelphia, which was a pretty incredible stretch run down to the World Series. So I got to be a part of that. And that really got the fire going of, okay, I need to figure out my best path to the big leagues. And maybe that means going outside the Phillies organization, which I had been in for my entire professional career in the minors, from Reading to Lehigh Valley and then Philadelphia. And New York, to me, was the perfect place to go to. My dad spent 2 years in the Mets broadcast booth, so I was very familiar with Howie already and Chris Majkowski and everything, and Gary and all those guys. So it seemed like a really good fit. And then Jake Eisenberg left for Kansas City, and then the news comes out that Wayne is going to get the TV job in LA. So here I'm thinking, okay, there's 2 opportunities in the booth. And I had been close the year before. I'd interviewed for the job that Jake had the year prior. So I knew I had already had the connections with the folks in New York. So the process was pretty quick, honestly. Right after New Year's, I got a call saying, hey, this is what's going to be happening. This is kind of where we're looking in the directions. Are you interested in applying? And at that point, I already sent everything in. I was like, oh, yeah, it's already there. Don't worry. I've already applied for it. And then end of January came around, Martin Luther King Day. Actually, I got a call from Ray Martell, who's our executive producer, and he said, hey, we'd like for you to interview for the position. Let's set up a time. So that was Monday. I interviewed on, I believe, Thursday. And then it was the following Friday that I got the call from Ivan Lee, who's the program director at WCBS 880, to let me know that I had gotten the job as the number 3, and that I would be doing the pre and post for all 162 games, and then filling in for Howie when he was unable to do games, and got a chance now to work with Keith Rad, who has become honestly one of my closest friends. And over the last 4 or 5 months of knowing each other, it's pretty amazing because in the minor leagues, we're such a tight-knit community that for the most part, we all know each other in some way. Keith and I didn't know each other at all. We had never interacted. We had never met. We never crossed paths. And then we got down to spring training together and just hit the ground running. And it was a pretty seamless transition, honestly. We got to connect with each other probably 2 or 3 days after the news came out that we were going to be joining the booth. And from there, just hit the ground running.
Great. Now, glad to have you back, up here in New York, Pat, and love having you with the Mets. And I know you said your father was with the Mets, and that was 2006, 2007, 2 very big years for the Mets. One positive, one not so positive. I know this year right now for the Mets, a not so positive year. A lot of high expectations. This is a team that spent a ton of money. And every time it seems like they're inching back slightly. They had that nice little stretch before the All-Star break, but then they ended up losing that Padres series. They came out, won a few games, but now you lost this series versus the Red Sox. What's the general feel right now with this Mets team as you get to see them and travel with the team to all these different cities day in and day out?
Well, I think what you hear from them in the media is what we get a chance to see, is that these guys think that there's just too much talent in the clubhouse to not figure out a way to string together some wins. Unfortunately, here we are, July 24th, and we're getting pretty close to the end. As weird as that is to sound, we're almost at the 100-game mark already. So there's still time, but also a lot of time has already gone by. And I think they recognize that. And Buck Showalter, I think, has been pretty candid about it, just saying that each time it feels like they're starting to get something going, all of a sudden they take a couple of steps backwards. And he said that with certain guys individually too, that it's been 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And unfortunately, that's what it's been like for the Mets this year is, you go to out to California and you win 7 of 10 and you feel like, okay, this team is really what we expected them to be, 7 games over 500. And since that point, outside of the 6-game winning streak, really haven't been able to string together a consistent stretch. And we're not talking about a consistent stretch of just 7 games right now. Mm-hmm. They have to string together a consistent stretch over the next 60 games where they have to play almost 600 to 700 baseball to get back into the wild card. Do I think they have the roster built to do it? I do. I think there's just too much talent. I think we're seeing Pete Alonso start to swing the bat much better. I think we're seeing Jeff McNeil start to swing the bat much better. And I think you can see that shift a little bit just in terms of their body languages and the feeling in the clubhouse. But then again, you have a game like we had on Sunday night where the Red Sox win 6-1. You drop 2 of 3, and it's like, okay, we're back to square one heading into the Yankees series. So it's tough. It's difficult, I think. It's difficult on the guys. Mm-hmm. I was talking with Mark Vientos the other day when he came up, and he said, we never want to lose. That's the last thing any of these guys want. They are so competitive. I asked Max Scherzer out in Los Angeles, what keeps him going? Why is he still pitching at 38, 39 years old? He said, I want to win a World Series. At this point in my career, that's why I'm here. David Robertson said the same thing. These guys came to New York to win a World Series. So they're disappointed, obviously, that right now that they're not in contention.
Yeah. And one thing I kept thinking of, oh, sorry, Rich. I was going to say, ironically, too, when we were in that rough stretch in May and June following that great West Coast trip, the one thing I kept thinking to myself, and this is great with your father being down with the Phillies, it's saying, all right, what team last year had that type of run where they were under 500 in June, but everything clicked at the right time? That's a team that barely made it into that third wild card spot and represented the National League in the World Series. Only difference now between this Mets team and last year's Phillies team. And I think on paper, this Mets team is a better roster than last year's Phillies team. The only problem, and you said it perfectly, is where we are in the season, where we are with the games. I mean, almost at that 100-game mark, there really isn't much time, and they would really have to rip off almost a 5-1 week before the trade deadline. Because if you're not doing that, I just don't see how this team is going to be able to replicate what the Phillies did last year. I was really hoping this year's Mets team could be last year's Phillies team, but it's not looking so pretty right now because by this point last year, the Phillies were already over 500 again and starting to make a name in that wild card race.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is before we could even talk about the wild card is you have to get back to the 500 mark, right? Mm-hmm. And then from there, you can look at, okay, how many teams are ahead of you? But it's an interesting one or the other, right? Are you looking at, is the record the end all be all, or is it how many games out of the wild card are we? So you have to look at, I think, both in kind of different ways of, okay, yeah, 7 games out of the wild card, but 7 games under 500. And the other thing is, how many teams do you have to leapfrog to get in? If you're chasing 2 or 3 teams, you're thinking, okay, maybe something can happen here. Can we click off 10 of 15 and maybe they drop 6 of 10 or whatever, and all of a sudden you're chipping away. I just don't know right now how much time is left. There is time left, fortunately, to get to that spot, but it's just going to have to be chipping away, and it starts with winning series and eventually sweeping series.
If you're just joining us live here on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, we're here live with Pat McCarthy, the WCBS 880 radio broadcaster for the New York Mets. And now on the topic of the trade deadline, obviously there's been rumors swirling around players like Tommy Pham, Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander. It's one of those weeks where it has to be arguably one of, if not 2 of the most important weeks of the season when setting up your team for postseason contention. Now, Pat, how do you see this team approaching the trade deadline come the next 7 days?
Honestly, I don't know. I think it's going to be really interesting, and it's going to be up all the way until Sunday, truthfully, and potentially all the way up until that off day on Monday on August 1st. So I think Steve Cohen and Billy Epler recognize where the team is at right now, and I can't see them adding at this point. It just doesn't make sense to trade away prospects to get different guys to come in and help to potentially make a run. I just don't see them doing that where they're at in the standings right now. Now, listen, if they rattle off, let's just say they rattle off 5 in a row right now to close out the week, and somebody ahead of them drops 5 straight, and now we're thinking, okay, now maybe they're only 3 games back. Okay, maybe you stay put where you're at and and hope that these guys figure things out. Otherwise, guys that you mentioned, I think there's a lot of guys on one-year deals on expiring contracts that could bring back some decent hauls. And if you think about even the Eduardo Escobar trade, just taking the entire salary, just that way you can get a bigger prospect or maybe a upper echelon prospect and somebody that's on the upper levels of the minors versus getting a high school kid who's 18 years old. Maybe you're getting a 22-year-old AA pitcher that can help you in the next 2 years. Because one thing we know about Steve Cohen and Billy Epler right now is this is not going to be any kind of rebuild. It's going to be a retool so that way this team can compete next year and continue to compete year on and year on. And Steve Cohen has said too, he said he's considered this money already spent. It's gone already. So he's willing to eat some of the salaries if it means bringing back some prospects. So guys that you mentioned, like Tommy Pham, David Robertson, maybe even a Brooks Raley, guys like that, who I think have been really good this season, could potentially be dealt. I'd love to see them stick around because I think they could really help this team if they figure things out during the last 2.5 months.
Yeah. Leading into that, obviously the handicap for this team, I think we can all kind of agree, has been the inconsistency in the pitching, particularly the front end, especially the top two guys that are making the most money in the sport. Do you see, we know Robertson could probably move, Pham and those guys are easy. They're on 1-year deals, but the two big guys, it's clearly not working out. I don't know if the pitch clock has something to do with it or is it father time, but can you see these guys, one of them at least moving on the trade deadline?
Well, it's up to them, honestly. And that's what it comes down to is, do they want to waive their no trade clauses to go somewhere? And are teams willing to take on the contracts? Max Scherzer's in an interesting position. He has an opt-out after this year. He's going to make $43 million next year. Will he opt in? He's probably not going to get $43 million anywhere else. And if he sees that this team still has a path to win beyond next year, I would think that he stays. I think it would have to be the right move for these guys, though. And Justin Verlander has said that he came to New York to win a World Series, and he wants to win a World Series in New York. So I think that they're going to stay. I think it would require the Mets taking on a good chunk of the contract in order to move them. And I think at that point, the Mets would rather just have them in the rotation so that way they can compete through the next 2 months. And hey, who knows what happens in the next 2 months? But you need to be able to put a team together that's going to win, and those guys help you win when they're in your rotation.
Yeah. Following up on that, we did ask our Twitch and YouTube chats if they had any questions for you, Pat. And we do have a question more related to the trade deadline, but more of the after effect. Pat, what are your thoughts on the baby Mets? Do you think come August 1st, if the Mets sell, they should have all 4 kids, as in Beatty, Alvarez, Viento, Mauricio, playing every day? And that is from J Hertz 122, Jonathan Hernandez. What do you think, Pat?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I've been blown away by Francisco Alvarez, first off. I saw him a little bit in AAA last year when Syracuse came to Lehigh Valley, and I didn't know what to expect, honestly. I had heard a lot about him, but I didn't really know what he was going to do. And he came up and he looked overmatched in the first couple of weeks when he got to the big leagues. And man, has he answered every single question. So I don't think there's any questions about Francisco Alvarez. He's going to play every single day if he can. And then Omar Narvaez will spell him. Brett Beatty, I think he's proven that he can play third base at this level. And I think he's going to go through these ebbs and flows of a rookie season because we've seen some flashes of some really impressive stuff. And those guys are really fun to watch. And then you throw Vientos into the mix. The 3 of them together are really cool to watch interact with each other just because they've all come up through the system together. And you can tell that they're all great friends. And what I think is most interesting about them is that they all come from different backgrounds. You have Vientos from Florida. You have Alvarez from Venezuela. You have Beatty from Texas, and how these guys have come together and they've become really, really good friends over the season. So I would love to see them continue to play. I do think Mark Vientos is going to be here for a good amount of time, especially with the injury to Luis Guillorme and how long Luis is potentially going to be out and the question marks around Starling Marte's health. So I think if Vientos is here, I think he's going to have to play. So that way you can see what you have from him. And then Ronnie Mauricio right now is pretty remarkable. I do think we'll see him at some point this season. The numbers that he's putting up in AAA are just out of this world. The numbers that we saw in spring training were really impressive. So I would love to see Mauricio come up here and play. But again, if he's going to come up here, he has to play. And I think that's the number one thing post-trade deadline is, will these guys play consistently? And if not, maybe it's best for them to stay in AAA. But it'll be interesting to see after August 1st.
Corey, I know you had a question on. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. It would be interesting to see what happens after this trade deadline's done. But looking back just to this last weekend, I know you're up in Boston for the Red Sox series there. And definitely have to ask, because your experience as a fan and now also in the booth working with the team, you've seen a lot of different stadiums, a lot of different ballparks. Just curious to know what your favorite city and/or ballpark to visit is, whether it's through work or as a fan. Because Fenway, for me personally, I love the history aspect of it. I know history was your favorite subject in school, as was mine. So I just love going in there, because something about Fenway, you walk into that stadium and it feels like a historic park as soon as you walk in. As old as it is, I feel like they do a great job maintaining it. Although seeing the water going through and people doing the slip and slides looked a little fun there. But I have to ask, through your travels with the team and as a fan, what is your favorite city and/or ballpark to go visit?
Yeah, I've been really fortunate that this year I've gone to a lot of ballparks that I hadn't gone to in years past. And for me, when we rolled up to Dodger Stadium for the first time, we got off the bus and Keith and I both looked at each other and just went, wow. Because we're doing this together for the first time. Both of us are in the big leagues for the first time together. So we're getting a chance to see a lot of these ballparks together for the first time. So Dodger Stadium was really awesome. I love San Francisco. Petco Park was really neat in San Diego. But I will say this weekend in Fenway was pretty special. In between the doubleheaders, Keith and I went out. We walked out to the Monster. We went inside the Monster. We got a chance to sign the Monster. To me, that was a really cool experience. I love Wrigley. All those ballparks have so much great feel to them. I love any kind of ballpark that has character to it and that has a different type of feel to it. If I were to give you my favorite, though, and you wrap that with favorite city, it's probably Pittsburgh. I love PNC Park. I love Pittsburgh as a city.
No.
And that was a great trip this year.
I love
Tom
it.
does not like Pittsburgh for some strange reason.
Pat, I'm right there with you. It's the best. It's the
Again,
PNC is my personal
listen,
favorite.
My argument, why does that stadium get credit for a skyline that they didn't create, blows my mind. Yeah. Also, for the record, Pat, I went to it was a Met Pirate game a few years ago, and they had half the concession stands just closed, and that was pretty off-putting.
So it wasn't a great experience.
It wasn't a great experience, and I think it's very, very overrated. But I know I'm on an island there.
It's my number one, though. Don't worry, Pat. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Fenway. You know what, the uniqueness of the way they incorporate that stadium into the city, where they section off the streets. Your ticket gets you into the street. It doesn't get you necessarily into the stadium. And just the ability to go in and out and walk around. It just feels so old school for me and so different than sitting on the BQE and waiting to get to Citi Field or the Cross Bronx to get to Yankee Stadium, where you're basically parking lot to stadium. That to me is just, it's a totally different experience, which makes it so cool.
Yeah, I love that it's right there in the neighborhood. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's built into the fabric of the city, which is just amazing.
And it's picturesque, as you can find on possibly Instagram. Make sure to give us a follow on Instagram at Empire State of Baseball. You give our handles a follow at Corey Favs, at JR Pugs, at Rich J Rivera, and at T Wospil. Pat, I believe it's at PXP McCarthy _ Did I get that right?
I think so. I don't know. I always get confused because I have two, right? I have my personal one, and then I have my work one. And I always forget what my work one what the handle actually it is. Twitter's correct, I can tell you that. And there's a link to Instagram in the Twitter bio. I know that.
Twitter
there we go.
X.
There we go. P McCarthy _ PXP. That's what we had on Instagram there. Unless Pat changed in the last 24 hours. Shame on you, Pat. All righty. Well, we got a game to play. It is called Trick of the Trade. It is a game we play on a monthly basis. And with the trade deadline in 7 days' time, this is the best time to throw this one up here. And guess what? For the first time, it's a Mets-Yankees deal with a Mets question and a Yankees question. So this trade happened July 16, 2003. The Mets got one single player in a 3-player deal with the Yankees, sent Ryan Bigcondoa Anderson Garcia, and a mystery player. So I need to know the 2 mystery players, one for the Yankees and one from the Mets. What are we thinking, Pat?
Oh gosh, I have absolutely no idea.
Yes. Music to my ears.
So the Mets acquired 1 player. The Mets acquired 1 and sent 3 to the Yankees in 2003.
The Mets sent 1 player to the Yankees, and the Yankees sent 3 players to the Mets in the deal. I actually have it switched, but the Yankees sent
Rich.
3 players. I know. I've never gotten it wrong. This is the first time I've ever gotten it wrong. Yankees sent these 3 players to the Mets. The Mets sent 1 player to the Yanks.
Boy, I couldn't. Robin Ventura. I have no idea.
Not a bad guess.
Robin Ventura was in a trade straight up for David Justice a couple years prior to this deal, but it's not that deal.
Love a good Ventura.
I feel like it's like Mike Stanton, like the original Mike Stanton.
Ooh,
he pitched for both.
The
teams,
real Mike,
right?
Stanton.
Not the artist formerly known.
Stanton is not involved in this deal, but I will say the Mets sent a reliever to the Yankees in this deal.
I know the Mets side where they traded. The Mets traded Benitez. I just cannot tell you who the Yankee has.
That is correct. Yes, that is correct. So Armando Benitez is the Mets player going in the deal. The Yankees player, I'll give you a couple of hints. The Yankees player has Staten Island relevance and shares this. And his last name is the same as the first name of one of the 2 players in the Yankees deal.
Huh.
His last name is one of the same as his first name.
So last name is probably Anderson, right?
Yes, sir.
I think so. Unless they traded Matt Ryan. It could have been like a pre-football.
Also going to be looking in the chat too for
Jason Anderson.
It is Jason Anderson. Anderson, Joe. Very good. Very good. So you add to your lead. That's ever so growing. Get out my screen, Ronald Acuna Jr. You're not ready yet. All righty, but that's correct. Yes, Armando Benitez went to the deal to the Yankees. Benitez had like a sub-2 ERA in his first few appearances with the Yanks, and he was struggling there with the Mets at the tail end of his career. Entered the Yankees as a settlement, so that was a cool Mets-Yankees deal.
Definition of a roller coaster that Benitez was. But
yeah, he was.
Before we get you out of here, Pat, we'll just ask you one more question, and I got to ask this. With your father being the Phillies broadcaster, what's Thanksgiving dinner going to be like this year? Especially if one of the teams is going to definitely finish ahead of the other one. What's it going to be like? Who's going to get the bragging rights at Thanksgiving this year?
Well, I don't know. Thanksgiving is always difficult. We always end up working for some reason. We're always working an NFL game or a college football game somewhere. Actually, the picture to the right is a perfect example. That's the day after Thanksgiving this year in Missouri. Boy, my hair was really high that day. Either way, yeah, I think, what makes our relationship really neat is that we don't always talk shop, to be honest. We try and just stick with where we're at different moments. And I think that's what, whenever we get together, especially for Thanksgiving and stuff like that, it's always special. So, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. Right now, both teams are trying to make a push towards the playoffs. And at the beginning, I thought both teams were going to get in. We'll see what happens.
One very last question. I promise one more Twitch question. This is going to be from Greg Kandari 11. What advice would you give to someone who wants to get into broadcasting?
Take every and any opportunity that comes your way. Get tape any way you can. Doesn't matter where it comes from. Doesn't matter what type of game it is. Get behind a microphone. Get comfortable and make connections. That's the best advice I can give you.
Love it. And that's the advice many young broadcasters should adhere to, and never give up the dream, because dreams can come true, and it came true for Pat McCarthy. Pat, we appreciate you coming on. We thank you so much for your time today, and we look forward to talking to you soon.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Pat.
Thanks, Pat.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right. Let's get back to the 4. Here we go. Gentlemen, that was great. And Pat, thank you so much once again for joining us. Make sure to give him a follow on Instagram and Twitter. Let's throw those up one more time, because there's a lot there. At @PMcCarthy_PXP on Instagram. Twitter @PatMcCarthy_. Again, back to the graphics. What is with the graphics? It's just showing up out of nowhere.
Rich, you're the one doing it.
What's
you're in
going
control.
on? This is crazy. Like
I mean, you're
never
messing
had
up
that
you're messing up the trade. You're putting up Shohei Ohtani to the Yankees. Like, what are we doing?
I know. God forbid somebody did more jobs around here. It'd be crazy, right? So
No, God
anyway,
forbid someone do a job
we're going
correctly.
to keep it moving here. We got a lot more show left for you guys. And before we get to our next segment, Joe, what's on our YouTube page lately?
We are now airing live on YouTube. You can like, share, and subscribe. It's Empire State of Baseball on YouTube. For post-game recaps, our Mets Minute, our River Ave Rewind, we post after important Mets and Yankees games. We've been slacking lately because we've been enjoying the summer and the teams have been frustrated, but we're going to get back on that this week, big time. And then we have all the episodes, segments, and other things to enjoy. Corey works up some special meme posts. We actually got one that broke 5,000 thanks to Mr. Corey's creativity. So you can follow us and watch all of our content on there.
Venture into the baseball mind, the Corey Favaloro, and you'll find yourself on quite the journey. If you go to Instagram and YouTube, you'll definitely find it there. Corey does a great job with those reels. The Empire Express, however, makes its return. We're going to get into it briefly. Yankees Mets do battle starting tomorrow for the second set of the Subway Series at Yankee Stadium. And obviously we could get into everything going into the previous weekend with the Mets and losing 2 to the Red Sox, Yankees taking 3 straight against Kansas City. And Thomas, as good as it feels to finally see the Yankees sweep a series for the first time since late May, do you feel any differently than you did last week about this team? Or
Rich, we're back, buddy. We're back. Yankees to the World Series. World Series 5.
AC.
I want Ohtani. I want Soto. I want Belly. I want bring Scherzer's old ass over. Let's go. Let's go. Let's ride.
I love it.
Let's get us to the World Series. We're back. The Royals are listen, the Royals have a bad record, maybe, but they have more fight than what you would think. Some might call them the Burge Jr. Some might say that. I want it. But yeah, the Yankees are back. They just swept the Royals. Going to smack the Mets this week, and we're going.
Yeah, we're going, man. We're going all the way to selling next week. I don't know. It's a tough call. And kind of back to when we were talking to Pat about, I don't know how to tackle this with the Yankees. For me, I asked a question on Twitter. What record do the Yankees need to amass to establish themselves as buyers ahead of the trade deadline? And at that rate, I think they had about 8 games left. Honestly, I hate to sound crass. They need to go perfect for me to be convinced that they deserve to be buyers at the trade deadline.
That's not.
They have to be.
Yeah, I mean, you can think that, but it's not going to be the case.
Because they need to put themselves in better ground, Tom, for them to try to make deals at the deadline that's going to benefit them.
Listen, if
they're
the Yankees,
retool at best.
unless the Yankees, I'm telling you, I'm not saying like my opinion of what I think they should do. I think just the reality is, unless they just get blown out and they win 1 game this week, they're gonna be at least somewhat of buyers at the deadline. They're gonna still be in it. They're still what? They're 2 games back on the 3rd wild card. I think they're gonna buy. Now, is that the best thing for the Yankees and moving forward? And do I really think the Yankees are going to the World Series? No, but that's not the way they operate. I just don't see a world where they're just gonna sell off. I know there was a story I think last week how. I think Howe wanted to get himself under the 1 luxury tax threshold, which is like shedding like $1.5 million worth of payroll, which wouldn't be that hard. But yeah, I don't think they need to go perfect to do that. I think a 500 week, they're going to be involved with something.
See, I think it comes down to Aaron Judge, and if the Yankees buy the trade deadline,
they know what Aaron Judge is. They're just not saying.
No, but I think it's the timeline of when he comes back. If they are uncertain, because all he's doing right now is taking batting practice in a simulated game. That's a long way from playing 9 innings in the field and running the bases. So
I don't think they're uncertain. I think they know. They're just not saying it. It's not like they're like, we have no idea.
Here's the bottom line. The Yankees are not buying if they don't have confidence that Aaron Judge is going to be back within a week or so of the trade deadline. If they do not think he's going to be back in full capacity, they're not going to buy. They might not sell, but they're not going to buy because there's nothing to buy to if you don't have Judge back.
I agree with that.
There's no way to improve this team to the point where they can contend unless they know Judge is coming back on X date.
I agree with that, but I think they haven't made it public, but they have it somewhere circled. Target rehab start here.
But that's going to set the tone. Where if Judge is back, if let's say Judge comes back within a day or two of the trade deadline, I think
he won't be back by then
because the team is fixable. If you go out and get a Bellinger and pair him in the middle of the lineup with Judge, this team's fixable. If Judge isn't going to be back until the end of August, you don't know where you're going to be, even though you're only 2 games back of the wild card. I don't have confidence as a general manager of giving up prospect capital when I might not be in a position to contend when Judge gets back.
And if you want to look at this series coming up too with the Mets and the Yankees, because the Yankees do have a decent shot at ending this week in that third wild card. You look at the matchups. You have the Mets versus the Yankees. All right, if you can't beat the Mets right now, then you don't deserve to be in the playoffs. I'm sorry, it's as simple as that. Mets are on life support, as we were just discussing with Pat McCarthy. Yankees, listen, Yankees aren't in great shape. They're in the hospital too, but they're not in the ICU. They're just in a regular room. So then you look at the teams right ahead of them. All right, you got the Blue Jays, you got the Red Sox, all these teams right there. Blue Jays are playing the Dodgers. Red Sox are playing probably the best team in baseball in the Atlanta Braves. Those 2 teams very well could get swept or lose their series. You take these 2 from the Mets as you should. Again, you should not lose to the Mets if you have playoff aspirations right now as a ball club. So the Yankees could find themselves in a good position come next week with the trading deadline that they are there in the third wild card spot. Now, we could have the whole debate. Should they go all in? Are they going to try to buy? Are they going to bring in rentals? We could make a whole debate whether they should, whether they shouldn't. I know we'll have a whole trade deadline episode again next week as well. But right now, the Yankees are in decent position, and I'd much rather their spot than the Mets. And this is a great week to really try to cement your playoff hopes right now. Because if the Yankees do come out, and if they get swept by the Mets, I mean, we said the Mets have to basically be perfect this next week to even consider making a trade. If you're the Yankees and you get swept by the Mets, then forget about sell everybody, board it up, fire the team. It's over.
I think you can't look at it exactly that way. I think you have to look at it how many games back you are at the deadline. I don't think because like you said, if the Red Sox and like the Astros and teams ahead of them have a horrible week and the Yankees just kind of like tread water and it's still 2 games, it's still 3 games by the deadline, they're going to buy. Now, if for some reason it goes the other way and the Yankees are 5 or 6 back, then yeah, I agree. I just don't think that's going to be the case. I think they'll be in it enough and they're going to convince themselves that they could make a run. Now, the interesting part of it is that threshold, the tax threshold, and do they try to kind of do that buy and sell where they shed some payroll, bring in some guys, but any guy that's going to have impacts that bring along money as well. So I don't know how that would even work. I don't know. It's going to be.
I just don't see it. I just don't see it. Essentially, again, they have to put on such a run, and in the middle of
they don't have to
today
put on.
And next Tuesday, you're also playing the Baltimore Orioles, which is it's a huge series for them, and it's crazy with everything.
But
you're still within 8.5 games of the division that I still think is lost. But it's crazy that they can still be in play depending on how this week goes. So this is a very
they don't have to exactly at this point. The division is out, and again, I don't think this is some great team that's going to go on a great playoff run, but they're 2 games back of the wild card right now. I feel like, I mean, you guys are talking about it like they're 10 game back of the wild card, and like they're not. They are right there. Now they're not a great team,
but I think they're set up enough to make moves at the deadline. If they're buy moves, they're going to be set up for a team that's going to get knocked out in the first round at best.
Yeah, probably.
That's how I'm looking at it.
They're not like they're. I don't think they look at it that way. I think if they look at it that they want to continue the almost 30-year streak of having winning seasons. They want to be in the playoffs again. They'll be happy to some extent with that, and that's how they're looking at it. I don't think they're just looking at it as this is a lost season yet. You hear it enough when you hear interviews with Boone and interviews with other people on the team, and they might be wrong and they're thinking too highly of this team, but that's where they are.
It's not a lost season because lost season indicates you're a seller at the deadline. The Yankees are by no stretch of the imagination selling at the deadline. The question is whether or not you're buying and sacrificing prospect capital. At this particular moment, if you do not have a date on Judge, I don't think you're buying. and until that point in time, or you go on a streak where you rattle off 5 wins in a row leading into the deadline, where you're now in control of your own destiny. Right now, the Yankees are not in control of their own destiny, and they are without their best player. That makes them, at this particular moment, holders. I don't know if they would become buyers unless Judge comes back and they felt confident that he was going to be 100% healthy right away.
And we'll see what happens. Like we said, this is a big week for the Yankees, a great opportunity to gain some ground in this wild card between the series they have this week and the series their opponents have this week. So we'll see what happens. But again, we got a 2-game Subway Series set. Mets, Yankees. I could tell you who I think is going to win. I think it's going to be a split. I'm going to go with the boring 1-1 bold prediction from the Yankee side of the house. Again, this, to Tom's point before, you're treading water. And I think this Yankee team does continue to tread some water throughout this week. I do think they end up winning that Orioles series, but again, they're not going to sweep this week. They're not going to sweep the series. I don't think it's going to be 1-1. And from a Mets standpoint, that's unacceptable too, because you have to go near perfect. The series itself is more important, I believe, to the Mets, just because this is it. This is your last chance to make a run. You have to go near perfect this week to even have a shot. So it's more important technically for the Mets, but from a Yankee standpoint, it's important because you have a real chance to gain ground this week.
It's a tough call. I'm going to root for them. I'm a fan of the team, obviously. I'm not going to root for them to go 0 for the century and then sell at the trade deadline. I'm just having a hard time believing in how good this team could be post August 1st. All righty. Well, now we're going to get into the fantasy hot corner. Corey, though, what do we got happening on Twitter?
If you follow us on Twitter, we've been very active the last few weeks, posted our trades from last week's episode. A lot of great interaction with the fans, so thank you again. But go ahead, follow us on Twitter. We're at 2,100 plus followers and continuing to grow. The show is at ESB Podcast, myself at G Gory, Joe at JR Pugs, Rich at Rich J Rivera, and Tom at T Wospil on Twitter, or now as we like to call it, X. So we'll see what ends up happening with this new X rebrand over the next few weeks.
Can we not?
No, can we? What is that all about?
I mean, we got no choice.
We do.
We're along for the ride.
There we go. You can follow ESB videos at X Videos, the new Twitter.
I'm going to take his shirt off during the broadcast.
What an absolute clown show.
Oh, it's not correct.
I can't believe it.
Not correct.
Oh, I mean, listen, anything that comes out of that clown's mouth is believable at this point.
Dear Lord. All right, we're not that show, so let's keep it moving with some baseball. Fantasy Hot Corner has been a consistent segment we've had since last year on season 1 of the show. And normally we play the video submission from our special guest, Jonathan Hernandez. But today, Jonathan is joining us live on the show. So what's going on, Johnny?
What's up, guys?
I'm here. John's a big X videos guy.
Because people like to talk when I'm not around. So anything you guys got to say, get it off your chest today. Come on, I'm here for it. It's all right.
I love it. He already wants it. He already wants the heat. But, John, as always, we want to know, who is your player spotlight? Who is your pickup of the week?
Well, I don't have to memorize everything like I usually do when I make the videos. I can actually just look at it right in front of me. So let's do a spotlight. This one hurts a little bit. I hate the Braves, hate them. But Ronald Acuna is an absolute animal. The guy is an absolute freak of nature. He's on pace. I don't know if he's going to get there, but he has a chance to do 40-50, which has never been done. He's got 46 stolen bases already, 23 home runs. He's got to hit a few more home runs throughout the next couple of weeks to get there. But, hey, listen, all he has to do is hit a few, and you never know. 40-50 it might be going 40.
50's gone. I mean, 50's, it's going to be 70.
50 is gone, but he could go 40. He could go 40, 50, 40, 60 easily. 50 is going to happen for stolen bases. It's a matter of
40, 70 is more.
I mean, it's never been done before, so it's going to be a real exclusive club of one when he does do it, if he does do it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, Acuna right now is the unquestioned MVP in the National League. Although I got to say, John, I played you in fantasy this week in Yahoo. I have Acuna, and you beat me like, what was it, 8-3 final roughly in the stat league? But Acuna, you got to love him, though.
Rich gave me the work in our league, so you can't do anything when the guy puts up 700 points and you put up 600. It is what it is. Yeah. But just to put into perspective what he's doing, there's only 4 guys that have ever gone 40-40. I mean, we know who they are, right? Canseco, Bonds, Rodriguez, and Soriano.
I thought you were gonna turn this into a core curriculum there,
Yeah,
John, for
really.
a second.
What he's doing is historic. It's you could attribute it a little bit to the stolen bases, to the bigger bags, to making it a little bit easier to steal bases, but it's still impressive regardless. I hate him, but I love him.
I'll also say I'm the only one on this podcast that had Acuna winning the NL MVP earlier in the year before the season started. So just saying, that was me. All right.
What man?
John,
you really got out on that ledge picking Ronald Acuna Jr.
When all three of you guys
let's see
picked
the
Manny
pickup
Machado,
before we-
and I was the only one who wanted to stand on a creative leg.
Oh my
Screw you,
God.
Thomas.
Let's
that
Ronald-
Jonathan.
I can't believe it. Like, so brave of you of picking Ronald Acuna Jr. to be the best player in the NL.
What were the preseason odds for Acuna to win the MVP? I'm curious. He had to be under plus 500, so it's not like Rich really went out on a limb there either. So
Nah. But I was the only one to pick him. So all right. Well, John, who do you have for the player pickup of the week?
John froze.
No, lost.
Really hate to see that.
Oh boy,
we lost them. I can tell you a little bit. I'll tell you what though. As we're waiting, I can tell you a little bit about CJ Abrams because I actually picked him up in my league.
I picked him up in our league
last Sunday, so not yesterday, but the week before. So again, like usual, I'm ahead of John on the curve here, and he's been crushing it. He's especially in the categories league. He's give you some stolen bases. Got a little bit of pop. Batting average isn't horrible. He's had a good week. Hit 2 homers this week, at least. Let's go on the last 6 games on ESPN. I endorse this pick.
And he's in a much better spot now because he was, I know Abrams originally come from the Padres organization before coming over here to the Nationals. But, I mean, you want to talk about being lost. You're a shortstop prospect, and you're stuck in that Padres system where you have another young, exciting player who's been playing a lot of outfield now in Fernando Tatis. But they have some other shortstop prospects right up there, too. So he's in a good spot. A bad Nationals team, and the Nationals have the luxury of being able to ride him out because he had a very rough start to the season, CJ Abrams, but he is really starting to turn around now. So if he is available, go ahead and scoop him.
Yeah, he was the prized possession in the Soto trade, amongst other very top prospects. But he was definitely the biggest prize.
Yep.
Well, I think we got Jonathan back. So, Jonathan, are you there?
Boost Mobile kicked me off the Wi-Fi apparently. So.
Yep.
I don't know what's going on with my Wi-Fi.
Not a sponsor.
Yeah. CJ Abrams, I heard you guys talking about him, but yeah, that's the pickup. No, Joe picked him up today, beat me to it. It's gonna go grab him, but little power, a little bit of stolen bases. He's on his way to a 40-40 season too. No, I'm just kidding. But it's the Nationals, so take it with a grain of salt. But it's always nice to see some production. I know they've had a couple of guys that have been useful to fantasy managers, right, Corey?
Oh yeah.
No,
Lane,
what's his name? Lane Thomas? That's his name?
Lane Thomas.
Lane Thomas. Lane Thomas is the reason why we're even relevant right now on the ESPN. Kudos to Lane.
Well, the Nationals got a little young core going on. You got CJ Abrams in there, Lane Thomas, as you mentioned. They had Mackenzie Gore, also part of the Juan Soto deal. Josiah Gray, who was an all-star this year. I mean, listen, this team could be half a decade away. You got little pieces like that to have some control over the next few years. You never know.
I mean, look, there's always post-hype guys too. It takes a little time. Not everybody can just come up and be a star in baseball. Mm-hmm. It's not an easy sport. It's the only sport where you can fail 70% of the time, and that's considered being really good. So, there's guys that I'm sure have helped
you
guys.
Come up with that yourself, John?
Huh?
Did you come up with that yourself? That was really insightful.
Yeah, I did. Sometimes you just steal shit.
Yeah.
Or you can be Chooch's pick of the week, which fails 90% of the time and still has a job.
That's very true.
You guys,
that's really true.
I'm giving the worst advice. Some of them have been shitty, but that's some are good, some not too bad. I think
Chooch's pick of the week will come back next week, but we needed a break this week.
So I mean, what I try to do is I try to pick guys that are not owned in at least 60% of leagues. So I try to keep it under 40, and then I really try to go even lower than that. I try to find somebody that's like a diamond or maybe a diamond in the rough. It's easy to say, yeah, go pick up the top prospect in baseball, but sometimes it's not always that easy. You can't just do it. So, especially in a league like our league that's very in depth and has a lot of keepers and minor leaguers that are and stuff like that, you got to find other ways to get some points on your team. So,
well, I do like the CJ Abrams pick again. The Nationals, that little young core that they're cropping up, and hopefully by the time that they're successful, Steven Strasburg will get activated off the IL. So, we'll so weak.
At least
so
he got
weak.
World Series and his World Series MVP, but he's close.
Boatload of
Yeah.
money.
For it.
It has to be the worst contract of all time in terms of baseball, I would think.
It's
You
one.
guys
Of,
can
I
struggle
mean,
with it.
yeah, it's up there. He basically got paid a bunch of money and then just didn't pitch.
Yep.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah. It's sad. John's on a screenshot moment, so I think at
John's
this
out.
point we're gonna have to
God.
relieve
John's out.
John
I
and his
can't-
mobile Wi-Fi. John, oh there he is back. John, we're gonna let you go here, man. Get that Wi-Fi figured out, my man.
I just shut it off, so now I'm on just regular cellular. But go figure. That was can't win.
Well, thanks for your time, man. We appreciate the picks. Ronald Acuna, of course, much deserved spotlight, and CJ Abrams. And Jonathan, we will see you in a couple weeks' time.
Later, guys.
See you later, John.
All righty. So, that was some Wi-Fi. That takes me back to some of the times I've gotten kicked off my own show, which was multiple times. Takes me back to the time when Corey couldn't get into the show because his stuff was updating. We all have the technical glitches here on the show, but you know what doesn't normally have a technical glitch? That's Twitch. Tom, what do you got on Twitch?
Just like rhyming, like just incredible effort by you there, Richard.
I love it.
So hopefully you are watching us live on Twitch. It's really the best way. It's our original platform of streaming. And follow us, subscribe to Empire State of Baseball on Twitch. Link is in our link tree on our Instagram and Twitter. Great way to get involved with the show. There it is. Corey showing the notifications that pop up when we go live. You can get in the chat. We had some great chats that came through today with our guests. So with some questions coming through there with Pat. So get involved in the chat, in the show, and subscribe on Twitch.
Oh yeah, and if you could join us next week on Twitch and Twitter and YouTube, it would be episode number 55 of Empire State of Baseball. That's Monday, July 31st, the final day of July, and just under 24 hours away from the MLB trade deadline, which is ending on August the 1st at 6 p.m. Eastern time. Now, like we did last year, a little different. Last year, we did trades around Juan Soto prior to Juan Soto getting traded. This time around, we're just going to come up with a blockbuster deal each that involves all the teams in Major League Baseball. So whether that's a Shohei Ohtani to the Dodgers trade or a Juan Soto to the Miami Marlins, we're going to figure it out, and we're going to reveal them live on our show next week for our final trade deadline edition of Empire State of Baseball. But obviously, we're going to end this thing. It's been a pleasure doing the show with you gentlemen today. It was a great show. Tom, any final words of wisdom?
No.
You're so lame, dude. You're so lame. And you think you're cool, which is the funny thing. Joe, what do you got?
Nothing. Thanks a lot to Pat for coming on.
Yeah.
He was fantastic. He's been a revelation in the booth for the Mets this year. He's going to have big things ahead of him. Look out next year. I just thought of this. I should have asked him. Next year, the Mets and Phillies play in London. So Pat and his father are going to be on the road in London broadcasting the games against each other. So that'll be fun. Honestly, big shout out to Pat. He was fantastic. Great insight into the Mets team, and we hope to have him on again at some point.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, definitely. Kudos to Pat. Thank you again, Pat, for joining the show. Great discussion. Thank you to the choochers in the chat. A lot of good questions came in, so thank you again. Thank you, Joe, for the great weekend at Lake Naomi, and thank you, Rich and Tom. Great show as always. Love chatting with you all.
Of course, man. It was a great show. Big thanks to Pat McCarthy. That was a lot of insight, and especially as 4 aspiring sports journalists, at least at one point, got to listen in on a play-by-play man who was doing it for the New York Mets and gave some great advice. So it was awesome. Listen, Pat, thank you for John for joining in today for the live edition of the Fantasy Hot Corner. But no thanks to Boost Mobile for screwing up his Wi-Fi. We'll see you all next Monday for Empire State of Baseball. Take care.